Previously, we built the outfeed table's top. Now it's time to make the base. After wrapping up the work on the top of the outfeed table, we're ready to tackle some of the structure that's going on underneath. And I want to show you what I'm talking about here. So I'll set this one in place. And you can see some of the parts. The first is this wide leg stop. Now this part serves two purposes. First, when you set up the outfeed table, it keeps the leg assembly from bending back too far and holds it in its upright place. The leg stop also is wide so that it provides some extra strength and stiffens the whole top assembly. Now, there are hinges along the front edge here that attach the leg assembly to a hinge plate. Now, along the leading edge of the outfeed table are a pair of hardwood cleats. There's a gap between those cleats, and that gap is to accept a hardwood rail that you'll attach to the back edge of your table saw, and that hooks the outfeed table in place. I said earlier that the outfeed table was really easy to assemble, and what makes it so is that all you have to do really is just cut the parts to size and attach them. And this is a real good example of that. I'm going to start by flipping over the top, and then I'm going to position the hinge plate in place on the underside of the top, and then just screw it in place. I've already drilled some countersunk shank holes for the screws. Next, I can attach the leg stop, and that gets put in place right behind the hinge plate. And what I'm going to do is drive a screw in from the back of the leg stop into the hinge plate. And I'm going to do that on each end. And then I'm going to use some long screws to drive through the top of the leg stop into the tabletop. Once that's taken care of, I'm going to drill the screw holes in the cleats and attach those along the front edge of the table. I've attached the front cleat so that it's flush with the front edge of the outfeed table. Now I'm ready to attach the second cleat, but it needs to go in just the right spot. What I'm looking for is that it'll hook over the rail that gets attached to the table saw. The big thing here is that I don't want it to be a real snug fit because then it's not going to go on and off real easy. So what I've done instead is I've taken a short piece from when I cut that to length and I've applied a few strips of masking tape on it. Now it's going to be just the right size to give me just a little bit of wiggle room to get the outfeed table on and off. Now I can attach this second cleat with some screws. Now I'll just work my way along the line using my spacer. Now one more thing, you'll notice that I've inset the cleats from the edge of the outfeed table. It gives it just a little bit more of a finished look and a nice shadow line detail. Now that takes care of the tabletop and the support structure underneath. The final part of the process is making the leg assembly. The key thing here is getting the lengths of the leg just right. And that starts by measuring the height of your saw table. So for this saw, you can see that it's just about 34.5 inches. But that's not the final height of the leg. We're going to reduce that by 2.5 inches, and that's going to account for the thickness of the tabletop as well as the thickness of the hinge plate, and it's also going to give you a little bit of adjustment room for the leg levelers. All I have to do now is cross-cut the legs to length. And I've started by squaring up one end, and then I've set a stop on my cross-cut sled so that both of the legs will be the same size. The two legs are attached to each other by a pair of hardwood stretchers that are at the top and the bottom of the leg assembly. Now the stretchers need to be located just right, specifically the one at the top, because you need to account for the hinges. So I'm actually using the hinges as a spacer when I set the stretchers in place. Then I can connect the legs to the stretchers with long screws. After I installed the legs, I noticed that they were binding a little bit right here where they met the hinge plate. So I took the legs off and eased that sharp corner a little bit. Now, depending on the hinges that you use, you may need to do the same thing. Once that's done, there's one final thing that you need to do on the leg assembly, and that's to install the leg adjusters on the bottom. Now, those thread inside T-nuts that get tapped into a hole that I've already drilled. Now I'm ready to take this over to the table saw and get it installed. The outfeed table hooks onto a hardwood rail that I've attached to the rear fence assembly on this table saw. Now I did that with some screws, and you might have to drill some holes for that. Now the height or the width of this piece is pretty important, and let me show you why. When you set the outfeed table in place, you want to size this rail so that the top of the outfeed table is at the same height or even slightly below the surface of your saw table. That way, when it's in use, a workpiece isn't going to catch on the edge of the outfeed table. And that's really all there is to it. So in a short time, you can build a versatile outfeed table that'll help you make safer and more accurate cuts at your table saw.